he's already talking about moving up after one title defense. How do you think Khamzat would do at light heavyweight if he moved up?
Oh, that's another one. We kind of dismissed that right away. He's too small for light heavyweight, and he's gonna get knocked out right away. I don't think so either. I think he would do very well at light heavyweight. His wrestling in a division that is very low on great wrestling, I think he would do very good there as well.
Yeah, it would be funny if you guys never fight a middleweight, but then you move up to light heavyweight, huh?
Yeah.
And
yeah,
that happens there.
That'd be cool too.
Ilya has the ability to fight for 3 belts. I think Pereira has the ability to fight for 3 belts. And I think Chimaev has the ability to compete in 3 weight classes at a very high level. He didn't fight for the belt at 170. But he's a champ at 85, and I do believe that if he goes to 205, with the state of the division and the people fighting there, he could be a real problem for guys in that weight class. Man, it's an exciting time, especially if you're Team Chimaev, because this dude right now, he seems to have the world at his fingertips. And it doesn't seem like he's a guy that's going to take that for granted, but we'll see.
We've seen Khamzat Chimaev fight at welterweight.
Here's the fascinating part about this whole scenario. We're looking at the genuine possibility of watching him compete at middleweight, and that's where things get absolutely captivating. Picture this fighter with such incredible flexibility and raw influence that he can literally announce his intention to jump to light heavyweight, and suddenly the entire organization has to completely restructure their plans around that single decision. We're dealing with a level of power and adaptability that forces everyone else to react, where one fighter's choice can shift the dynamics of an entire weight class and change the competitive landscape overnight.
I'd like to see him defend his title at at a weight first. Yeah, I'd like to see him defend his title before he talks about jumping around from, you're going to keep going up in weight divisions without defending. Yeah, I'd rather see him defend.
The UFC light heavy.
The officiating situation reached a complete boiling point when the fighter hit her absolute limit with the poor calls. Instead of launching a proper investigation into the referee's performance, the league chose to silence criticism by slapping her with a substantial financial penalty that sent shockwaves throughout the organization.
That Chimaev could screw the entire light heavyweight division by moving up. And Khalil was really just complimenting Chimaev, but it was strong. I mean, I look at Khalil and I think that's the guy. I know in the right setting that is the guy. If fights were the way that fights should be, which is equal amongst us, Khalil would be the guy.
The light heavyweight division stands at the edge of complete pandemonium right now, and we're talking about earth-shattering, division-altering chaos. A massive storm is gathering momentum in the UFC, and Khamzat Chimaev sits at its very center. These rumors have been circulating for months, building steam, but here's the real situation unfolding. Inside sources connected to the UFC suggest that Dana White is actually preparing for a game-changing announcement that nobody saw coming. We're looking at Khamzat potentially making the leap to 205 pounds, and this isn't some routine weight adjustment we're witnessing here. This represents a seismic shift, the type of strategic move that will obliterate existing title hopes and completely reconstruct the entire framework of one of the sport's most vicious and talent-stacked divisions. But the situation becomes even more mind-blowing when you consider this angle. What if our fundamental understanding of weight class supremacy is totally backwards, completely off base from reality? This potential transition that Khamzat is contemplating could literally transform MMA history forever. However, the transformation might not unfold the way anyone anticipates or predicts. It's a strategic decision that demands we completely reassess our assumptions about power, technical ability, and honestly, the core principles of competition within mixed martial arts. The burning question that has everyone speculating is whether we're about to witness Chimaev's complete domination spanning multiple weight categories, or if we're staring at a massive disruption to established thinking that will force everyone to reconsider how this entire sport actually functions.
Where the championship game is the same amount as the semifinal round, Khalil would be the guy. In fact, Khalil would have pretty dominantly beaten up Alex Pereira and very dominantly beaten up Prohaska. I mean, Khalil would not only be the world champion, he would be the world. You could go back about 4 years, and Khalil would be the world champion for 4 years. Khalil would be setting records.
The unfortunate circumstances led to a disappointing conclusion for the season. Multiple factors contributed to the underwhelming finish, and these problems reflect deeper systemic issues that need addressing.
So when Khalil comes out and he's got Chimaev's nuts all over his chin, it's when I'm watching it, it's like, wow, he must have really got his ass kicked. And that must have really been a beating to have Khalil come out and speaking that way. But is it true? The champion of every weight class.
When Khalil Roundtree Jr. speaks about another fighter, you absolutely must listen, because this is someone recognized for his devastating knockout power and his completely straightforward, no-nonsense fighting philosophy. He very rarely, and I emphasize very rarely, provides such enthusiastic praise or delivers such serious warnings about fellow competitors. So when he steps forward and openly acknowledges that Khamzat Chimaev could genuinely disrupt an entire division, that revelation speaks volumes about the caliber of fighter we're examining here. This goes far beyond typical fight promotion or casual commentary, but here's what makes this entire discussion even more intriguing and complex. The person analyzing this situation isn't simply accepting Khalil's assessment at surface value and moving forward. They're actually questioning the fundamental principles of how we measure excellence in MMA, challenging the standards we've relied on for years to determine greatness. This is where the discussion becomes truly wild and thought-provoking. Could Khalil Roundtree, a fighter we've witnessed struggle at crucial moments, actually represent a forgotten legend whose true potential has never been fully recognized? What if the regulations themselves, the actual framework of the sport, have been systematically preventing genuine champions like him from achieving their deserved success this entire time? This analysis isn't attempting to disrespect Chimaev or minimize his impressive achievements. Absolutely not. It's about re-examining the sport's fundamental assumptions, the concepts we automatically accept as factual without proper scrutiny or deeper investigation. The speaker presents this fascinating argument that Khalil's natural talent, his pure destructive potential, is completely undeniable to anyone who has studied his performances carefully. But here's the critical limitation that changes everything. It only reaches full expression under circumstances that rarely occur in today's UFC environment. They create this compelling image of a fighter who's perfectly designed for mayhem, for a different competitive era perhaps. A reality where pure combat excellence isn't compromised by the requirements of strategic stamina management in 5-round championship battles. So consider this hypothetical situation for a moment. Khalil operating without restrictions, competing without the constant pressure of a punishing 5-round war looming over every decision. Could he genuinely dominate the way this analysis suggests he's capable of? The response from people who truly comprehend the sport is an overwhelming definitive yes. It's an audacious claim, one that directly contradicts conventional wisdom and everything we've been taught about championship level fighting and what it takes to succeed at the highest level.
If they moved up, would still be champion. The champion in every weight class of the UFC right now, if they moved down, would no longer be champion. Think about that.
The garbled transmission made it difficult to understand the complete message. Technical difficulties interrupted the broadcast, causing significant audio problems that prevented clear communication.
It's true in the majority of weight classes in boxing, not all of them. It's true in the majority of weight classes in boxing. It's true in all of the weight classes of wrestling currently, right now. Freestyle and Greco-Roman. Every champion could move up and still be champion. Every champion, if they were to move down, would no longer be champion.
Check out this incredible statistic. 4 years reigning as champion, systematically defeating legends like Alex Pereira and Glover Teixeira with complete authority. This isn't exaggerated hype or biased fan commentary we're discussing here. This represents a revolutionary reconsideration of combat mechanics and what genuinely determines victory inside the octagon. The speaker maintains that Khalil Roundtree's physical build, his innate explosiveness, and the way his frame is naturally constructed transforms him into an absolute 3-round destroyer of opponents. But here's the devastating paradox that defines his career. That identical physique simultaneously represents his most significant vulnerability in championship competition. The conditioning necessary for 5-round battles, they contend, completely alters the entire strategic landscape in ways most observers don't truly grasp or appreciate. It benefits a completely different type of athlete, a different tactical methodology, and here's the crucial insight that changes everything. It actually punishes raw explosive power when that power cannot be maintained consistently over 25 grueling minutes of competition. This viewpoint compels us to examine something genuinely uncomfortable that nobody wants to confront directly. Are we actually witnessing the elite fighters performing in their most authentic form during competition, or are we essentially watching a specialized endurance examination that distorts and conceals genuine combat capability and fighting instincts? Consider that concept seriously, because it represents a genuinely profound question about the nature of competition itself. This discussion transcends Khalil as a single competitor or individual case study. It's essentially a comprehensive critique of the entire championship framework that the UFC has constructed over decades. If specific body types, particular fighting methodologies face inherent disadvantages because of the 5-round structure, then how many potential legends have we completely missed over the years? How many explosive powerhouses, fighters engineered for brief devastating displays of violence, have been dismissed as fighters who gas out or labeled as unsuitable for championship competition, when perhaps the competitive format itself created the problem? The speaker's position isn't that 5-round fights are fundamentally wrong or should be completely abolished from the sport, but that they establish a distorted understanding of who represents the superior fighter, giving preference to endurance specialists over pure combat artists. It creates this complex web of hypothetical scenarios for numerous careers, forcing you to reconsider every fighter you've ever watched fade during the championship rounds. So the ultimate question emerges naturally: is Khamzat's meteoric rise simply another example of this exact same phenomenon we've been discussing? Or does he represent something genuinely unique in a way that completely transcends these traditional limitations and constraints? Perhaps it's simply a matter of perspective and individual interpretation.
It's always been perceived that the bigger guy has the advantage. And it's just never been true historically. I love to give people the example, but Mike Tyson never, not once, outweighed an opponent. We're also told that there's a reach advantage. Mike Tyson...
The audio quality deteriorated significantly, making it impossible to distinguish the individual words or understand the intended message being conveyed during this segment.
He never weighed more and he never had a longer reach. We're told there's a height advantage. Mike Tyson was never taller than an opponent. How do you like that? Muhammad Ali was 198 pounds when he was the heavyweight champion of the world. Rocky Marciano never broke 200 pounds when he was the heavyweight champion of the world. I'm just sharing, there's never been a time.
Hearing such tremendous praise for Chimaev directly from Khalil Roundtree, someone who completely represents determination and devastating power inside the octagon, genuinely forces you to stop and completely reconsider everything you thought you understood. It's almost as though Roundtree himself experienced this incredible aura of supremacy, this pure force of nature characteristic that Chimaev possesses and brings to every competition. The speaker interprets this respect into something much deeper, a powerful, almost instinctual fear, suggesting that Khalil must have witnessed something genuinely frightening in Chimaev's skill set to discuss him with such reverence publicly. But then arrives the essential turning point in the discussion, the moment when everything gets completely reversed and challenged. Is it authentic, unparalleled dominance from Chimaev that we're observing, or is it simply an optical illusion within the sport's existing framework, a false impression generated by the regulations themselves? What if the genuine measurement of a champion isn't about advancing in weight and defeating larger opponents, but actually about maintaining your position against smaller, quicker, more technically sophisticated fighters who present different challenges? This presents a groundbreaking concept that could revolutionize everything we understand: the ascending versus descending theory of weight class power relationships. It's an idea that questions absolutely everything we've been taught about the benefits of size in combat sports throughout history. Think about this seriously for a moment. Really allow the implications to register completely. Does a bigger fighter always possess the advantage like we instinctively assume, or do history and logic actually suggest something completely different when you examine the statistical evidence carefully? This theory could entirely demolish how we perceive weight class dominance in the UFC and throughout all combat sports. The real question becomes whether we're prepared to accept that uncomfortable reality about how fighting actually works.
Chimaev, that grader is just every guy from down a weight class, right? If you want to know the hardest opponent you could possibly find, Khamzat Chimaev, it is actually not Alex Pereira. That's a wonderful match. You'd make a bunch of money if you were the promoter, but the hardest fight would be Islam. The hardest fight for everybody is the top guy from one weight class down.
Down. All right. Med det really var ett frisinge.
And I appreciate the respect that Khalil showed to Chimaev. I appreciate it. But Khalil would be surprised. I'm right that if this sport was contested the way that it should be, which is equal, they were all 3 rounds, Khalil.
Here's a genuinely mind-altering claim that will force you to completely reconsider everything you believe about mixed martial arts and weight class dynamics. Every weight class champion could theoretically advance upward and continue dominating their new division with relative ease. However, if they chose to move downward instead, their championship reign would conclude almost instantly upon making that transition. Allow that concept to fully register and settle in your mind. It compels you to re-examine every single bout you've ever witnessed with completely fresh perspective and understanding. We naturally assume almost without thinking that moving upward represents the more difficult challenge, that confronting bigger and stronger opponents creates an impossible barrier that only the most exceptional talents can successfully overcome. But this reasoning completely flips the entire narrative upside down and challenges everything we think we know. It proposes that losing weight, sacrificing that essential mass through devastating weight cuts, actually depletes a fighter far more severely than gaining weight ever could. It's not about the muscle development or the size benefits at all. It's about the biological damage that the cutting process inflicts on the human body and performance. Consider this perspective carefully. Why is cutting weight such a devastating, torturous ordeal that we witness fighters endure repeatedly, if being smaller supposedly makes you more dominant in your original weight class? The reasoning falls apart completely when you examine it with proper scrutiny and attention. When you study octagon history throughout the UFC's existence, it's a consistent pattern that emerges. A concealed truth that extends across all combat sports disciplines and competitions. This isn't simply a UFC peculiarity or some strange characteristic of contemporary MMA culture. This represents a basic principle of combat mechanics that we've systematically overlooked for generations. Does this revelation mean our complete understanding of weight divisions is founded on false information? A core misunderstanding of how actual fighting dynamics function? The consequences are completely staggering, particularly for a fighter like Khamzat, who appears to be defying this fundamental principle by considering an upward move. What does his confidence reveal about information he possesses that we don't have access to? He would achieve record-breaking world championship status and would have assembled an incredible legacy.
You have that belt about 4 years. If Khalil was to go up to heavyweight right now, now again, it's 3. Khalil's got too many muscles. No matter how he trains, he will never be able to go 5 rounds.
The match results and statistics remain unclear due to technical difficulties. The information about fight outcomes and round-by-round scoring was not transmitted clearly during this portion.
I believe that Khalil could go up to heavyweight and he would have those heavyweights paying him the same compliments that he's paying Chimaev. So are the compliments fair? Yeah, sure, that's Khalil's opinion. But is it because Chimaev is so good, or is it just because he's the champion from one weight class down? I suppose we won.
The respect that Khalil demonstrated for Chimaev was authentic and unmistakable, a genuine testament to Chimaev's undeniable presence and the powerful aura he projects in competition. But the speaker maintains that Khalil, and indeed many of us observing, would be absolutely astonished to discover the truth about his own capabilities and what he could achieve under different competitive circumstances. If the sport operated with true equity and fairness, contested in 3-round formats instead of 5-round championship battles, Khalil Rountree Jr. wouldn't simply be a champion. He would be a record-setting dominant force that people would discuss for generations. This isn't merely idle speculation or enthusiastic fan thinking. It represents a deeply held conviction based on understanding fighter physiology and combat dynamics at the highest level. It highlights the speaker's unwavering belief in Khalil's explosive power and fight-ending capability when unrestricted by the exhausting endurance requirements of championship rounds. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility that nobody really wants to address directly. Are we sacrificing pure raw fighting ability and devastating talent for the sake of endurance testing? Are the regulations inadvertently determining the type of champion we see crowned rather than allowing the purest talent and most dangerous fighters to rise naturally to the top? This perspective challenges the very definition of what excellence means in modern mixed martial arts. Would Chimaev's legend be partially a creation of these exact rules rather than pure fighting ability? The speaker emphasizes this point strongly and with conviction. Khalil Rountree in a 3-round format would not only be champion, but a multi-year record-setting king who would dominate his division like nobody else in history. This conviction stems from a profound understanding of fighter physiology and how different body types perform under various conditions. Khalil possesses an abundance of fast-twitch muscle fibers, the type that are engineered for explosive, devastating bursts of violence and power. But here's the harsh reality that defines his career. That exact attribute, that genetic advantage, makes sustained 5-round warfare a physically impossible challenge for him. His body simply isn't designed for extended competition, regardless of how intensely he trains or how much cardiovascular conditioning he completes. He's essentially a sprinter being forced to compete in a marathon, and we're evaluating his greatness based on marathon performance. This isn't a criticism of Khalil whatsoever. It's an observation about the limitations imposed by the current championship structure and how it favors specific body types over others. It's a brutal truth about how a fighter's biological composition dictates their success under particular rule sets and competitive formats. So if Khamzat Chimaev thrives in extended fights and can maintain his pace consistently, what does that reveal about his body type compared to Khalil's physical makeup? Does it mean he's inherently superior as a fighter overall, or simply better suited to these specific rules in competitive format? It's a distinction with massive implications for who we crown as the true elite and who gets remembered as genuinely great. Does the UFC accidentally promote endurance over pure fighting ability? Imagine Khalil Rountree unleashing his complete, totally unrestricted power against heavyweights, forcing them to offer him the exact same compliments and demonstrate the same respect that he once showed to Chimaev. This hypothetical scenario perfectly illustrates the speaker's primary thesis. Raw power, when unencumbered by exhaustive duration and cardiovascular demands, can conquer all opposition regardless of size. The question then becomes absolutely critical to everything we're analyzing. Is Chimaev truly exceptional, a phenomenon unlike any other fighter we've witnessed, or is his perceived invincibility, especially when discussing moving up in weight, simply a byproduct of the inherent advantages that a dominant fighter from a lower weight class naturally possesses over bigger, slower opponents? It's a debate that shakes the very foundation of UFC hierarchy and how we rank fighters across divisions. We may never definitively know the answer with absolute certainty, but the hypothesis is chilling when you consider the implications for the sport. If the hardest fight is always against the best competitor from one weight class down, then perhaps Khamzat's move to 205 isn't the challenge that everyone expects it to be. What if it's actually the strategic move of a genius, someone who's exploiting a hidden truth of combat sports that most people don't understand or recognize? This isn't just about weight classes and size advantages, it's about psychological warfare, strategy, and mastering the mechanics of victory at the highest level of competition. The future of the light heavyweight division hangs in the balance, a balance that's shifted by a perception we might have fundamentally misunderstood for decades. What secrets will Khamzat's new division reveal about the true nature of fighting? The consistency across various combat disciplines is completely undeniable when you begin analyzing the historical data systematically. Boxing, wrestling, kickboxing, and other combat sports all demonstrate the same pattern repeatedly. The evidence holds constant across every single one of these disciplines without exception. Champions who advance upward maintain their excellence, and frequently their dominance continues, while champions who move downward almost universally struggle and lose their competitive advantage. This isn't simply a UFC anomaly or some contemporary phenomenon unique to modern mixed martial arts. It represents a universal principle of weight-based competition that has been proven repeatedly throughout combat sports history across all eras. It completely destroys the mythology that bigger automatically translates to superior, or that a larger opponent automatically guarantees defeat for the smaller competitor. If a light heavyweight champion decided to drop down to middleweight competition, they wouldn't simply lose their competitive advantage. They would likely become a complete shadow of their previous self, completely unrecognizable in terms of athletic performance and fighting ability. The punishing weight cut, the severe metabolic stress it places on the body, strips away their power, their speed, their explosiveness, and their fundamental essence as a fighter gets completely drained away through the process. So here's the essential question that determines everything. If Khamzat Chimaev advances to 205 pounds, is he genuinely gaining an advantage by being larger than his current size, or is the perceived challenge of facing bigger opponents merely a psychological obstacle, a mental barrier, rather than an actual physical disadvantage? The speaker suggests something profound in this analysis, that our perception, not objective reality, represents the genuine obstacle that fighters and fans must overcome together. It's a revolutionary concept, especially in a sport that's completely obsessed with size advantages and weight class hierarchies throughout its entire structure. But what if the greatest advantage in fighting isn't physical size at all, but rather something far more subtle and sophisticated that we've been completely missing this entire time? Here's a statistic that will completely blow your mind and change your perspective forever. Mike Tyson never, and I emphasize never, possessed a longer reach than any of his opponents during his absolute prime years. This is precisely where the illusion of size advantage completely crumbles into nothing. The assumption that the bigger fighter always holds the advantage is deeply profoundly embedded in our collective understanding as fight fans and observers. Yet historically, when you actually study the official record books carefully, this simply isn't accurate information. Not even remotely close to being true. Think about the legendary figures for a moment, the absolute icons of combat sports throughout recorded history, and their actual physical measurements. Mike Tyson, arguably the most intimidating heavyweight in boxing's complete history, consistently defied every single perceived physical advantage that conventional wisdom claims a champion should possess. He was frequently shorter than his opponents, possessed a shorter reach, and never outweighed the fighters he was absolutely demolishing in the ring with devastating efficiency. He represented a force of nature, not because of his physical measurements or size advantages, but despite lacking them completely. His dominance wasn't constructed on size or reach or weight advantages whatsoever. It was built on skill, devastating speed, and absolutely crushing power that originated from technique and natural fighting ability. This single statistic alone should force a complete reevaluation of every assumption you hold about what creates a truly great fighter. If Iron Mike didn't require these supposed advantages that everyone constantly discusses, what does that reveal about every other fighter who has ever stepped into a ring or cage throughout history? Are we constantly misjudging potential and dismissing fighters based on outdated measurements that don't actually correlate with success in combat? What if Khamzat's power and dominance isn't about being large for his weight class at all, but something completely different that has absolutely nothing to do with physical size? The historical evidence contradicting the bigger is better mythology continues accumulating when you research the record books thoroughly, and it's honestly overwhelming in its consistency. Muhammad Ali, whose name resonates through eternity as possibly the greatest boxer who ever lived, ruled as heavyweight champion at a lean 210 pounds, not some massive hulking weight that dominated through size. Rocky Marciano, another undefeated legend whose perfect record speaks for itself, never exceeded 200 pounds during his entire legendary journey through the heavyweight division. These weren't gigantic beasts or physical anomalies who succeeded through size. They were supremely skilled athletes who maximized their capabilities through technique, heart, and fight intelligence, proving repeatedly that technique and determination defeat sheer mass every single time. So when we discuss Khamzat Chimaev moving to light heavyweight competition, are we falling into the exact same trap, repeating the same mistake we've made throughout combat sports history? Are we automatically assuming his success will result from his size and physical advantages, when history screams at us that this isn't how dominance actually functions in combat? The perception has always existed for as long as fighting has been documented, that size equals power and power equals victory automatically. It's almost like a mathematical equation in people's understanding. But the greatest fighters in history have consistently disproven this assumption repeatedly. It raises the question that nobody wants to address directly. How much has this flawed perception influenced fight results, commentary analysis, betting odds, and even how fighters are matched against each other? And if the perception is fundamentally incorrect, which the evidence strongly suggests it is, what does that mean for Khamzat's highly anticipated weight increase? Could all the excitement and anticipation be based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what will actually occur? This brings us directly back to the central question we began with originally. Is Khamzat Chimaev truly that exceptional, a once-in-a-generation talent that transcends normal fighting principles, or is his perceived dominance largely a result of his weight class advantage over opponents who are naturally smaller and weakened from weight cuts? The speaker provides a compelling, almost revolutionary counterargument that challenges everything we assume. The most difficult opponent you can possibly face isn't necessarily the fighter in your own weight class, or even the competitor above you in the next division upward. It's actually the absolute best fighter from one weight class below your current position. That's where the genuine danger exists and the real challenge awaits. Imagine Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champion with his incredible grappling skills, competing against a truly elite featherweight who's at the absolute pinnacle of their division. That represents the genuine threat, the real challenge that creates problems. The concept suggests that the most difficult fight comes from a slightly smaller, faster, more technically refined opponent who has perfected their skills against smaller bodies and developed incredible technique through that process. That creates a strategic nightmare to handle effectively. This principle completely reshapes our entire understanding of threat levels in MMA and who should actually be favored in competitive matchups. If this theory proves accurate across combat sports, then facing someone from a lower weight class actually represents the ultimate challenge, the most difficult test you can encounter. So for Khamzat, moving upward to 205 might paradoxically be simpler than remaining at 185 and facing a truly elite smaller threat who's faster and more technically sophisticated. It completely reverses the entire narrative and our understanding. Are we witnessing Khamzat choosing the path of least resistance rather than ultimate glory and the greatest challenge? Is this strategic brilliance or avoiding the real test of his abilities?